This week, the Department of Justice makes some major announcements that launch major debates. Elon Musk threatens a third party, and the TSA makes some welcome changes to your travel. These stories and much more straight ahead this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall. Let's meet our panel, the gentleman behind the stories at readline.com, Josh Mann, our managing editor, Michael Ryan, executive editor, and Adam Wittenberg is one of our staff reporters here at The Lion. Gentlemen, we dive right in on a very busy week. We were just talking about this before the camera started rolling. There was a lot of news. It seems like every week's big news. This week, in particular, seemed to be a week full of big news stories that I think you'd call safely scandals. Whether you want to choose Epstein, whether you want to choose Clapper and Comey and the Russia collusion stuff, whether you want to choose Biden's cognitive decline. There's a lot to choose from. Michael Ryan, you've chosen to start with the Epstein files.
Yeah, as you say, it's kind of sweeps week for scandals out there. Now, there's been a big buildup by the administration itself about the Epstein files and what we may see when they're released. And then all of a sudden, on a sleepy holiday Sunday, they release this information that there's nothing there. So let's move on. And a lot of people aren't accepting that. They're saying, what in the world? After all this buildup and after all that we know there is in there, they're not sending out anything. A lot of people say there's bigger fish to fry, and that's so noted. But, you know, the sheer breadth of the degeneracy in this scandal and the depth of the harm to the 1,000-plus girls involved is too much to look away from. A judge recently, or at least in the last few years, called Epstein the most infamous pedophile in U.S. history. But this tug of war over the files in the Epstein case seems even bigger than that. This may be something of a Lexington and Concord moment in what is a war between the most populous president in U.S. history and arguably the most sinister government in U.S. history. And if Trump is seen as retreating from that battle by his loyal supporters, then you could risk losing all the steam out of his revolution.
I think the confounding question in this story is Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, Donald Trump. Four figures who, yes, correct, Michael said it, Adam. They all promised the goods. They all promised to look under the hood. They got there, and then they said, well, there's really not much to see for whatever reason that happened. Now, if the conclusion by Trump voters and supporters of those people is that they're part of a cover-up, where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think it is potentially deflating. I do think the administration will still be able to weather that storm overall and soldier on because they are very strong with their domestic policies. But we have to remember that this is a political battle. And so for someone like Trump to bring this up in the election cycle, hey, if you elect me, I'll release the files, that pulled well. And I believe he wanted to do it. But now he's trying to negotiate, Middle East peace. He's trying to negotiate other things. And I think this got traded like a political football. I don't think the average American thinks a lot about that. They're just like, why did you change your mind? Why did you lie? Why did you go from yes to no? But we have to step back and look. This is right in the midst of these other new policy goals that they're trying to do. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying we need to look and examine why does this suddenly go away, or why do you suddenly change your tune?
Josh, here's another potential. People have floated the idea that they wanted to look under the hood. They were committed to looking under the hood, and once they did, whatever was under the hood is not there anymore. What's the likelihood that they really had nothing because it's not there to find anymore?
Well, it's got to be on the table. I mean, I still think it would be embarrassing, at least to maybe Bondi, if she kind of, no pun intended, trumped up what was in the files. I have them on my desk, and then actually she hadn't bothered to really look through them. So that's got to be on the table. To me, the interesting thing is the distrust of so many in the American public. I mean, after the Biden years and COVID and all of this, I think people are tired of being told things that turn out to be untrue. To put it mildly, all of the stories that we kind of referenced in the lead up to talking about this one. So I think the American public do want answers, and so we're going to have to kind of wait and see. My hope is that there's just a little more transparency. Just explain Was there nothing there and you thought there was? Fine, just explain it. But, as Adam said, sometimes it's a little bit of political football.
Yeah, and a little later we're going to play the clip of President Trump being asked about this, and didn't like the question, and a lot of people didn't like his answer. But Michael, on that, I would just ask kind of broadly, because we're going to get into the Biden story too on the cognitive decline and his doctor pleading the fifth. My thought maybe was, I know Trump used to do it during COVID. I know Chris Christie did it once after Bridgegate. What if these people, at least at a bare minimum, walked before the American public in the White House briefing room and just took an onslaught of every comer's question that anybody could come up with until they were talked out? Would that help?
It might, but I think the main thing is people are not only tired of being told untruths, as Josh mentioned, they're tired of being told nothing when they know something is there. There are a number of things that even Trump's sympathetic followers in the media are concerned that they're not hearing about. The January 6th situation and even the Trump assassination attempts. We're not getting much information about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, which is about the Biden story as well. The doctor pleading the fifth, Josh. We were kind of discussing the fact that all of this stuff rolling out at the same time, and we've heard it for so long. Do people get kind of glassy-eyed about what should be pretty big stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if as it seems, the President of the United States was in tremendous cognitive decline, health decline throughout. I mean, even from the election, we're seeing reports that when Biden was elected in 2020, that he was already in a diminished state. Then the question is, who is running the country? Who is making these decisions? And of course, there's speculation and some reasonable postulations about who were making decisions. But it does seem clear that there was a decline and that there was an attempt to at least ignore it, if not cover it up. This is one of the biggest scandals in the executive branch of the United States in its history, 250 years. And yet, we've been hearing about it for a year at least, maybe more. Some have been talking about it longer than that. And so I do think we're kind of tired of it. It's like, yeah, we know, move on, news cycle. But that's not good, because we do need to get to the bottom of it. And there is some political football being played once again over these issues, like there always is. But even so, it's too important a story to ignore. And so we have to keep on it. And we have to look, why is the doctor pleading the fifth? And who is responsible for these kinds of things that we saw in the last administration?
Yeah, Adam, you were kind of opining about this before the show started too. Russia collusion, the assassination attempt on Trump, Biden's cognitive decline, the Epstein files, all of these are being discussed literally this week, and we were kind of wondering aloud to ourselves, are people just, I don't want to say bored, but so familiar with it, they're kind of oversaturated with it, numb.
Yeah, I think it's that overwhelming feeling where you do kind of tune out or you get numb. I mean, you can only be shocked so many times repeatedly and over a short span before you just naturally desensitize, check out. And I want to go back to just one other thing about the Biden decline, and I think we see this cutting on both sides of the aisle, is that I think folks are kind of banking on the politicization of society. And so there's people that just so love Joe Biden that no matter what, they are going to tune out these negative reports, even concrete, factual reports about him declining. They tuned it out when it was happening. And there's people that, dislike Trump so much that no matter what he does, they're going to see negative, or people that like him. And so even though the facts, like Josh said, this is one of the most factually important scandals to rock our government in, possibly 100 years, that this guy probably wasn't even really running the country most of the time. It's going to go over a lot of people's heads who just have already put him in the good box or Trump in the bad box or whatever. They don't want to hear, and they're not able to hear facts.
Yeah, Michael, just to close the loop on this, all of those things that we just mentioned, are we getting sensory overload, tone deaf to all of its severity?
Oh, I don't think you can be paying attention to this without getting sensory overload. There are so many scandals in the air right now. I think there's a couple of distinct schools here. One is people who pay attention to legacy media, mostly liberal, have never heard some of these things. I mean, if you mention some of the names associated with some of these scandals to some of your liberal friends, they've never heard of them. The other side is the conservatives who've been watching this and waiting and waiting and waiting for someone to be held accountable, and they're getting more and more jaded.
Yeah, President Trump's approval rating, according to Rasmussen today, is down 2 points. So we'll see how this plays out as time marches on. Adam, a big decision from the Supreme Court, which was interesting because I think a lot of people, at least I think that's what you've written about, and that is specifically what churches can do via politics.
Yeah, it's a very interesting and very encouraging decision. I think it needs one final judicial step to become 100% official, but it will probably carry through. What it's basically saying is churches, which are qualified as nonprofits, are allowed to discuss politics and political candidates with their members, kind of like having a family discussion. And so we've heard these things about, separation of church and state, and you're a nonprofit, you shouldn't be taking sides in a political debate. But I think churches have been doing this for a long time. They just can't do it in name. And there is still a wall, like they're not probably supposed to hang campaign banners or like maybe make bold public statements like everyone should vote for this person or that. But having a family meeting and having a family discussion about, why a certain candidate might be beneficial or why the Bible or another faith, aligns with what they're saying, that should be allowed. And so the courts came down on that side.
Josh, you've got another story at readline.com this week on teachers' unions. They've made news refusing, I know, some literature now. I think the NEA has turned away literature related to the Holocaust that's regularly provided, if memory serves, and some rhetoric about ICE as well.
That's right. The National Education Association, or NEA, is having its annual meeting. It was this last weekend, and there was a rash of controversial and many would call crazy resolutions. And this year they actually made them private, because what happens with a lot of these things is you have members who propose resolutions and they get voted on. And there's sometimes a lot of embarrassment because these things can be quite crazy. In fact, a couple of years ago, the Lion really broke the story on a pro-communist resolution in Colorado that got national attention, and even the governor commented on that. So there's usually an attempt to kind of try to hide some of these things. And one of those resolutions was that the NEA pledges to defend democracy against Trump's embrace of fascism, they say, and that the term fascism, and they misspell it, which is really ironic, in NEA materials, must be used to characterize Trump policies. And so they're doubling down on calling him a fascist. And they also had some rhetoric about resisting immigration enforcement, which really is bad timing when we see the kinds of attacks on ICE folks right now.
And Adam, just briefly, speaking of the NEA misspelling fascism in their literature, public school enrollment, you have some new numbers.
Yeah, reports come out that nationwide public schools have lost over 1 million students since COVID. Just from 2020 to 2024, the steepest declines are actually in blue states, and in which also tend not to have school choice, which is just really nutty because they're the most bullish on everyone go to public school, yet people are fleeing these states, fleeing public schools, and the states that are gaining tend to be red states and tend to have school choice, and even there the public schools are actually benefiting. It's worth checking out.
Panel, thank you. When we return, we'll wade through some of the sights and sounds this past week from the news on Capitol Hill, from the devastating floods in Texas to Elon Musk threatening a third party. That's coming up on the Lion Week in Review. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. And if you missed any of today's show, or you're interested in going back and hearing previous shows or segments, hope you'll always head over to YouTube and catch the show, or readline.com for all the stories that we discuss here each and every week. Gentlemen, let's start with Elon Musk, who has been out there threatening a brand new party. Ron DeSantis down there in Florida had this to say about that.
We do have a problem in the Republican Party with these D.C. congressmen. They always run saying there's out of control spending and they're going to spend less, and they never do it. And so there's a gap between the campaign rhetoric and then the performance. Elon was doing Doge, and a lot of Congress didn't want anything to do with actually adopting the Doge cuts. If you're concerned about the debt, I wouldn't even worry about that, because I don't think just electing a few better people is going to change the trajectory. We need the incentives in Washington are going to lead to these outcomes, really regardless of the outcome of elections at this point. So you need to do a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and you can do that through the states. You can do it through Article 5. We've got 28 states that have approved this. There's another 4 or 5 that are on the docket. Once you hit 34, then you write an amendment, and then the states are able to ratify that. You need 3/4. If Elon wanted to weigh in on that and work on those state legislatures, he would have a monumental impact on doing this. And we also need term limits for members of Congress. And so you can do both of those things.
Interesting, Michael. Is Ron DeSantis right? Elon should use his force of nature and all of that money for something more fundamental, like amendments to the Constitution.
Yeah, I just don't think you can rebuild the system. I think you need to work within the system. We saw what happened with Ross Perot in 1992. He split the conservative vote, and we got Bill Clinton. And Republicans certainly don't want to go back to that. I think people are right to say, and there's people all over X saying, love Elon, but this is crazy. This will destroy what we have going. It will end the Trump revolution. You need to work on the balanced budget amendment. You need to work on term limits. You need to work on primarying the worst offenders in Congress. And you can love something to death. I know that Elon loves this country, but splitting the party is no way to love it.
Does the Epstein stuff, the things we were just discussing in the previous segment, Michael, and then Adam, I'd like you to weigh in. Does that help lend credence to what Elon is out there doing, Michael?
Yeah, I think so. Elon has become an incredible watchdog, but once he becomes the ruler of a new party that has absolutely no chance of taking power, but only wresting it from the people he was working with earlier, that's a little nuts to me.
Adam?
Yeah, I think it also confirms that the deep state or the entrenched political class is a lot of what we're fighting, but you have to step back and say, well, who's controlling them or who's manipulating them or what bigger agenda is at play? It's interesting, Musk, having tremendous means and now influence could be a player to counteract that, but even he is up against a mighty storm, so it'll be interesting, but yeah, I'm skeptical. It is difficult to make these seismic changes.
Josh, over on News Nation, Chris Cuomo's relatively new show, had this to say, interestingly, to those who would try to politically capitalize on the devastating floods in Texas. Listen.
Why did the flooding in Texas immediately become a blame game on social media? What happened to just mourning the dead in a natural disaster? Spreading awareness of what is needed by the communities and how you can help? Just pulling for the rescue of the missing? Can't anything escape the prism of partisan advantage? Forget about me saying we're going to expose the game, see the game. Forget about the game. Feel the shame. This is disgusting. You got 109 or whatever the number is right now, dead in Texas. The number's going to go up. 160 missing. How is this not just a point of empathy and sympathy? Children's dead bodies being recovered all day Saturday. And then this Houston pediatrician writes, may all visitors, children, non-MAGA voters, and pets be safe and dry. Are you effing kidding me? They deny climate change? Since when is death not more important than your politics?
Josh, this was the bulk of the focus of this devastation, a Christian camp or two that sat along the Guadalupe River. A lot of people were, particularly on the left, making, I don't know, political statements about this being Texas, a red state, a Republican voting state, Christian camps. Your reaction?
Yeah, I think Cuomo's right. We shouldn't politicize these issues, and it's really hard because there are questions about this. Something similar happened in 1987. I think they had one worse flood in 1932. These things have happened in this area, and yet the camps were still there. There are legitimate questions that should be asked about the warning system, but some of those answers have been given. There were warnings, so there's things to learn for sure. But to score political points, and certainly it was a shameful statement that this person made about MAGA supporters. That's political cheap shots, below the belt, and it is tragic. I think most Americans, it has captured their hearts, because we grieve, as a country, what was just devastating. And any parent and really any person can just feel the weight of that loss and the not knowing. I mean, so many are still missing and very likely have passed. We need some empathy in times like these.
We turn to the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. Interesting, last week, 4th of July weekend, President Trump made some suggestions during a rally that perhaps he was interested in accommodating illegal aliens who work on farms and maybe in hotels, and that led to a lot of people who support Donald Trump saying that sounded like amnesty to them. So Secretary Rollins came out this week and said this.
There's been a lot of noise in the last few days and a lot of questions about where the president stands in his vision for farm labor. The first thing I'll say is the president has been unequivocal that there will be no amnesty, and I think that's very, very important. I and the rest of our cabinet certainly support that, effectuate that, and make sure that happens every single day. The second thing, to your question about mass deportations, the president and I have spoken about that once or twice, and he has always been of the mindset that at the end of the day, the promise to America to ensure that we have a 100% American workforce stands, but we must be strategic in how we are implementing the mass deportation so as not to compromise our food supply.
Michael, this is an interesting kind of position that the president's in yet again, where there is a workforce, it's just undeniable, of how many illegal aliens, we don't know, maybe millions of people that are propping up certain industry. And President Trump is saying to mass deport them all at once would be terribly upsetting to those industries. But it's not amnesty, says the Secretary. Your reaction?
Well, it doesn't have to be amnesty to perhaps exempt certain populations. There's and even arch conservatives who are steeped in the agricultural world understand that what she's saying and what Trump is now waking up to, and that is you just can't throw everybody off the farm. People have been working here for multiple decades. They've been law-abiding. They've been good citizens and good people, hard workers. You have to be, as she says, strategic about how you go about deportations, especially when it comes to our food supply.
Another secretary spoke, and celebration. I think this is something everybody can agree with. We don't have to take off our shoes anymore when we catch a flight. Christy Noem had this.
We have some very exciting news to announce that today we have started a new no shoes policy with the Department, the Transportation Security Administration. TSA will no longer require travelers to remove their shoes when they go through our security checkpoints. This is something that I know for quite some time people have talked about and discussed, and we know that when President Trump was elected that he pledged to make life better for all Americans, and that includes those who are travelers going through our busy airports.
So, Adam, that's welcome news for most Americans, I think.
Yes, and this could stem the tide of what we mentioned briefly earlier, like that Trump's approval rating had just gone down 2 points. Well, maybe it's going to go up 4 or 5 or 6 points, because who wants to take their shoes off, at the airport? Who doesn't hate doing that? And I do think this is wise. This is good policy. I think it's been proven that the threat of the, repeat of the shoe bomber is incredibly low, and this is just a hated thing, and Trump is getting rid of it.
Trump's Department of Justice, led by Pam Bondi, he was asked on a couple of different occasions this week about certain things the FBI, Kash Patel have been working on. Let me play for you back-to-back 2 reactions. The first to a question about Jeffrey Epstein.
The former labor secretary who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of his death?
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration.
But not too long after this came a question about a new criminal investigation into James Comey and Clapper and Brennan and the folks that head Obama's intelligence agencies, and the Russia collusion story that was woven by these folks back then when he was running for president. And he said this.
James Comey and John Brennan, now under criminal investigation related to the Trump-Russia probe. Do you want to see these two guys behind bars?
Well, I know nothing about it other than what I read today, but I will tell you, I think they're very dishonest people. I think they're crooked as hell, and maybe they have to pay a price for that. I believe they are truly bad people and dishonest people. So whatever happens, happens.
So let me just go down the line, because I thought it was interesting when he said, look, I don't have any knowledge of this. And I think, truthfully, traditionally, we're supposed to think of the executive branch. Yes, they appoint a DOJ, but they don't collaborate. So, Michael, you heard the president say, I don't know what they're doing with Comey and Brennan, but I think they're crooked. Whereas when he was asked about Epstein, he said, why are people still interested about this? So that was within 24 hours of each other. What do you say?
Yeah, I think it's smart of the president to divorce himself from this deliberation on, going after Brennan and Comey. I think conservatives have known a lot of this stuff for years and been waiting for this moment, that there might be some accountability for some people, even though there's statute of limitations that are going to get in the way of a lot of things. The administration is going to be under a lot of pressure, I think, to educate the other people in this country about what happened. As for Epstein, you maybe there's a good reason not to release the client list and all that, but you can at least get out there and say, yay or nay, were there intelligence ties between Epstein and the intelligence agency? Yes or no? Was he blackmailing people? Yes or no? We need to know these things.
Josh, how does the president navigate this? I mean, these are just two of many things that the DOJ should, in theory, be investigating. The president's role in it, his passion for it, whether he knows anything about it, is engaged in it, wants to dismiss it. This all plays now to his base.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's above my pay grade, but I think it's important. I think, though, that the one thing that has been clear in his presidency so far is the transparency, at least his willingness to talk to the press. And so it is a little bit, I thought, out of character to kind of shut down a question like that. But on the other hand, I think it's possible that he was very intentional about that. But on the other hand, I think it's plausible that the president really did feel like it was a desecration. I mean, that's an interesting word he used. In light of the Texas floods they had been discussing and all of the victories, he just felt like that was an inappropriate question. We'll see how, if he continues to get those Epstein questions, whether he continues to take that line.
Adam, final thought.
Yeah, I do think he's avoiding it. When you have to shame or just move on, guys. Oh, ignore that. Oh, we got the flooding. That's the old political thing of just keep moving forward. But and I think he was also wise to temper his response about Comey, because I do hope the book is thrown at those guys, and I think Trump wants that too. But he's a little older, a little wiser, a little more tame, and he doesn't need to expend political breath on that to trump it up, for lack of a better word. Let's hope justice prevails.
Panel, thanks. When we return with the Lion Week in Review, our new year-long special, Faith and Freedom 250. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. As we close for the year, we will be bringing you brand new segments here on the show called Faith and Freedom 250. It's a celebration of our country as we approach that 250th milestone next July 4th. Here's our latest installment of Faith and Freedom 250 from the Herzog Foundation.
United States of America was founded on a bedrock of religious principles. Now, this may seem out of step with what the media and mainstream education system have promoted for generations, but it is an undeniable truth.
From the earliest settlement of North America, over a century before the American Revolution, this continent was developed by people seeking religious freedom. The story of how America was populated and built is a story of faith. Faith in God and faith in each other. Faith in a society not governed by kings, but by neighbors, by those who shared in the same struggles and joys of life.
In 1630, John Winthrop delivered his famous City on a Hill sermon to settlers about to land in the New World. He urged, "We must delight in each other, make others' conditions our own, rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together. For we must consider that we shall be as a city on a hill, the eyes of all people upon us." These settlers had fled persecution in Europe. They were making a new covenant, not only with one another, but with God. Their goal? A society where their faith guided their daily lives.
A look at the eastern seaboard in the 1700s reveals a pattern. Religious groups fled Europe and settled in colonies where they could worship freely. Congregationalists in Massachusetts, Quakers in Pennsylvania, Catholics in Maryland, Anglicans, Lutherans, and Presbyterians in the Carolinas all came seeking freedom and grace, hoping to find peace in this life and perfection in the next.
With the Word of God serving as the primary book of instruction for most school children and churches providing the main meeting place in colonial America, religion and faith were the common bonds which tied a community together. These eternal truths also provided the framework for how society functioned. Faith wasn't just a personal thing back then, it was public. Faith wasn't separated from life, it shaped their everyday lives.
The religious fire that led to the colonization of the eastern seaboard would be fanned by the Great Awakening of the 1730s. In a direct response to the Age of Reason sweeping through Western civilization, the Great Awakening transferred the administration of faith from the few ordained clergy to individuals. Faith became deeply personal. Ordinary people, not just clergy, began to see their relationship with God as their own responsibility.
It's in this period that the engine of the American Revolution was born. The men and women who came of age during and directly after the Great Awakening would be those who challenged the greatest military force on the planet and forge a new nation with a new set of ideals. A study of those who attended the First and Second Continental Congresses will show a full range of religious practices among them. Church attendance was almost a given in the time period before the Revolution, a social norm in which a high percentage of the colonists believed. Surely there were deists among them, but even these often practiced the religion of their forebears, even as they philosophized about the rational nature of God.
Look at the Declaration of Independence, the founding document of our nation. It's full of references to God. It's clear that our rights don't come from a king or a government, they come from a higher power. They are unalienable, natural, God-given, and not up for debate. During the war, American leaders called on God constantly. They prayed for protection, for guidance, for victory. They gave thanks after every battle, every breakthrough, and every moment of hope.
In the Bill of Rights, religion has a preeminent spot in the First Amendment, restricting Congress from making any law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The Constitution breaks with the classic model that each nation has its own religion and prohibits the government from forcing any one faith on its inhabitants. It goes on to deny the government from persecuting anyone for their own religious beliefs or practices. This often misinterpreted language gives the broadest freedom to citizens in the history of the world. It can be no accident that this is the very first right protected, proof of just how important faith was in the founding of the United States.
Nearly 20 years after the Declaration, George Washington stated the cause for faith plainly in his farewell address. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports, joining together our nation's future success in the foundation of faith.
A student of history cannot escape the multitude of references to biblical stories and lessons in the writings of the founders of our nation, nor can they miss the obvious impact of the age-old Judeo-Christian influence on our laws and on the structure of society. A nation without that foundation of faith wouldn't just be different, it would be something completely, wholly contrary to the founding tradition.